6 creepy true attic horror stories. So, we're going back to our roots. I'm going to try my best to post 2 episodes a week. An episode with a more well-known haunting and then an episode with a series of shorter stories that I find on Reddit. To the best of my knowledge, these stories are true, but you can decide for yourself. If you enjoy the episode, please don't forget to smash the like button, and if you aren't subscribed, then please subscribe to the channel as we climb towards 1000. Without further ado, let's start the first creepy story. One of the most memorable encounters Ryan ever had happened while he was engaged. His fiancée's family owned an old Texas house built in the 1860s. Only 3 families had ever lived in it, and the most recent owner was an older woman who they had nicknamed Edith, the Kitchen Ghost. Okay, so we know where this story's going. Nobody knew much about the families before Edith. The first time Ryan stepped into the house, he was overwhelmed by a rush of sensations. Goosebumps shot up his arms. He smelled fresh-baked goods, and a cold chill ran down his spine. But more troubling was the sudden wave of pain, heat dizziness, and the sharp taste of ash in his mouth. His fiancée's mother noticed his face turn pale as Ryan stared through the living room, past the dining room, and into the kitchen doorway. He saw what looked like a hand resting on the frame, and then, in a blink, it vanished. At that very moment, every cabinet in the kitchen swung open. The family barely even reacted. Apparently, this was normal. I can categorically state that this is not normal, and if you ever experience anything like this in your own home, call the Ghostbusters. About a year later, when his fiancée's family left to work out of state, Ryan moved into the house with her. Big mistake, Ryan. From the moment he arrived, the place was restless. The house creaked and groaned whenever he was alone. The smell of baked goods would drift through the rooms, only to be replaced by the acrid scent of burning and the taste of ash. He didn't understand the source of the burning smell until one night when he was alone. He heard what sounded like small footsteps in the attic above him. Oh, that's creepy shit. Ryan, get out. Don't stay there. Just tell your fiancé you can either stay or come with me, but I am leaving. The attic access was in a hall closet right across from the bedroom he shared with his fiancée. At first, he assumed it was just animals up there, but before long, the noises became more and more human sounding. Around 3 a.m, he heard a child's giggle coming from inside the closet. Now, children's giggles are 100% where I draw the line. Probably wouldn't even pack my bags. I'm leaving in whatever I am wearing. Ryan unlocked the 3 latches on the door and opened it. 3 latches? Yeah, that's a red flag. Inside were only blankets, fans, school bags, and the steep staircase leading into the attic. Don't go into the attic, Ryan, don't do it. There's nothing good up in the attic, I can tell you now. Curious, he moved everything aside and climbed up. Oh, for fuck's sake, Ryan. The moment he touched the stairs, the smell of burning intensified. The taste of ash coated his mouth, and he could feel his whole body growing hotter with every step. So this is where things get really creepy. At the top, he found an extra bedroom and bathroom completely charred. The walls, the furniture, and belongings were all black. Children's toys, half melted, sat scorched on a bed. The attic had clearly been destroyed by an intense fire decades earlier. As he explored, breathing became more and more difficult. When he turned to leave, a small, white, almost featureless face stared at him from the stairwell. He blinked, and the figure vanished. He rushed towards the stairs, only to hear them giggles and the tiny sound of footsteps behind him. Something collided with the door just as he slammed it shut. Slowly, the burning smell faded. The taste of ash disappeared, replaced by sweetness. Fresh cookie scent drifted through the hallway. When he finally walked into the kitchen for a drink, he turned from the fridge to find, once again, every cabinet was open. The dishes rattled inside them, then fell silent as the stovetop burners clicked on by themselves. Backing out of the kitchen, he turned towards the living room, and that's where he saw an old woman sitting calmly on the sofa, smiling at him before fading away. When Ryan explained everything to his fiance's family, they simply told him, "Ryan, you should never have gone into the attic in the first place." After they left again to work out of state, Ryan returned and attempted to cleanse the house of whatever negative presence lingered. But the darker side of the haunting still remained. Bonnie was around 9 or 10 years old when her family moved to a neighbourhood in West Virginia just across a massive bridge. They were moving in with some close family friends and a few of their relatives. The house itself was fairly large, 4 bedrooms including an office, a basement, 2 bathrooms and an attic that doubled as a walk-in closet. Yeah, you'd need a pretty large house with that many people. So, to reach the room that Bonnie and her mother shared, you had to walk through the upstairs bathroom and then through the walk-in closet. And that room also connected to yet another bedroom through a second door. When they arrived, they were told that the previous owners had practiced some kind of voodoo, though Bonnie never knew exactly what that meant. What Bonnie did know, however, was that the place was full of dolls, baby dolls, doll heads, and even Barbies hanging. Okay, yeah, that is creepy. Outside the room that she and her mother stayed in, 4 pencils were taped to the wall. Each pencil had a yarn head and a name written on it. What the fuck is this? Some kind of... What's that film? Hereditary. This is definitely some kind of hereditary shit. No one remembered the exact names, but Bonnie and her mother were warned by the family not to remove the pencils. But something just felt wrong, and they took them down anyway. Now, the bedroom door almost never stayed shut, so they used a book to wedge under the door so it stayed cracked instead of swinging wide open. One night, most of the adults went out to a local bar, leaving only 2 adults, Bonnie and another small child. Bonnie stayed in her room watching her iPad. She accidentally turned it off and didn't know the password, so she tried turning on the TV. Nothing. So she was left alone in silence and decided to read her favourite book. She remembered how unnaturally quiet the house felt, like it was too quiet. After about 10 minutes of sitting there in silence, her bedroom door suddenly flew open with force, sending the book and all its pages scattering all over the floor. Bonnie broke down crying instantly. It terrified her so deeply that she still thinks about it to this day. Later, she was told the toddler might have used the bathroom and pushed the door open. But the speed and force didn't match. Bonnie knew this was complete bullshit anyway. She never saw the kid. And there were other experiences after that. Toys would move from where she'd left them, and she refused to shower with the frosted glass doors closed because she could often see the outline of a figure standing outside them, and then it would disappear when she poked her head around the door. Her family moved out only a few months later, not because of the haunting, but because the relationship between the families became untenable. Still, that house left a mark on her childhood that she'll never forget. Andy never considered himself religious. He didn't believe in angels, demons, God, or the devil, but he did believe that dark entities existed. What they were, however, he couldn't say. So, when he was around 5 or 6 years old, his family moved into their first home. A beautiful, decent-sized house in a suburban neighbourhood in Pennsylvania. Andy was the oldest of 4 siblings, and by the time he was 8 or 9, the strange experiences began to form into vivid memories. He and his younger sister would both see glowing red eyes staring from the shadows of their shared closet. Obviously terrified, they would run screaming to their parents about rats with red eyes. Their parents dismissed it as childish imagination, nothing more than the usual monsters under the bed phase. Why don't parents ever believe their children? If my kids were telling me they were seeing spooky shit in their bedroom, I'd at least go and investigate with them to show them that there's nothing there. Anyway, not long after this, both of the children began hearing their names being called by unfamiliar voices coming from the basement. Okay, so if one kid was hearing the voices, maybe, just maybe, you could suggest that they were hearing things. But when both kids are hearing the voices, nah, that's some creepy shit. They slept on the upper level of the 2-story house, with the half-finished basement below. Admittedly, their parents were concerned, but could still offer no real explanation. Well, eventually, their mother began experiencing similar things. Yeah, you're gonna believe them now. As a devout Christian, she confided in the family's pastor, who suggested cleansing the house. They prayed and drew crosses with olive oil on the walls. Instead of helping, this only seemed to provoke the activity. I've heard of putting crosses up around the house, but I've never heard of drawing crosses in olive oil. If you've ever heard of that, let me know in the comments. So, the red eyes returned, and the voices continued. Shadowy figures appeared at the edges of the children's vision, and, at night, seemed to move across their rooms. Andy and his sister would scream and hide under the covers until their parents came running, only to find nothing there. Okay, well at least their parents were running in to check on them, unlike some parents who just tell their kids to shut up. Objects began falling, moving or shaking on their own. Lights flicked on and off, and doors opened and slammed shut on their own. Chairs scraped along the floor with nobody anywhere near them. It was literally the full catalogue of ghostly activity, the kind of shit you'd expect from a TV show. Only this was unfolding in real life. Their mother tried her best to comfort them, believing that something truly was happening. Although their father remained slightly more sceptical. Haha, well, that was until one night when everything changed. Andy came downstairs crying about the monster sitting on the basement steps. His father tried to reassure him that there was nothing there and he was just imagining things. As he spoke, the basement door suddenly slammed shut and Andy's dad felt a force shove him down the stairs. Traumatised, he climbed back to his feet and the two of them left the basement and locked the door behind them. That evening, they prayed together as a family. The activity continued on and off for years. Multiple attempts to cleanse the house, even with the help from their pastor, made no lasting difference. Cold spots formed and the disturbances intensified. Around age 12, while home alone in the basement where the computer sat, Andy heard a violent crash. Every shelf in the room had been forcefully knocked down. He ran outside and waited until his parents came home, terrified to re-enter. Yep, I know exactly how that feels, Andy. I remember doing exactly the same thing once when I was a kid. Their dogs barked at unseen things. Shadows moved along the walls, and disembodied voices whispered in the darkness. The whole family experienced the disturbances, but Andy and his sister seemed to bear the brunt of it. As he got older, Andy began reading Bible verses aloud to fend off what he called the demon. It never truly worked, but it made him feel slightly less helpless. One night remains burned into his memory. A tall, shadowy figure standing across the room near his sister's bed, visible only by the dim glow of the TV. It seemed to notice him awaken. When it looked directly at him, he dove under his covers and froze. Hiding under his blanket, he could hear it breathing and feel its presence looming over him until he eventually passed out from fear. When Andy was 14, his grandparents, who were caring for his cousins, both fell ill, and unfortunately, shortly after this, his grandmother passed away. His grandfather and the cousins moved into the house with them. Before long, they too noticed the strange things. The family avoided the basement and the upstairs hallway as much as possible. Some nights, all of them would huddle together in a single room, listening to footsteps, movements, and unexplained noises echo throughout the house. Another pastoral visit brought temporary relief, but Andy believed the constant family stress and dysfunction kept whatever was there stirred up. Things only got worse as time went on. His parents eventually divorced and his mother fell into, let's just say, bad habits. Andy and his siblings later moved in with their father to a townhouse. Andy carries the trauma to this day. He still dislikes the dark, avoids attics and unfinished basements, and is certain something malevolent lived in that house. He rarely talks about what happened except with his sister, who remembers the same things. Sharing the story now is his way of finally letting the memories breathe. Rebecca was about 9 years old and her younger sister was 6. Their parents were downstairs watching TV while the two girls headed upstairs to get ready for bed. It was dark, both outside and inside the house, and the only light switch for the stairway and upper hallway was on the first floor. Rebecca walked ahead and had just stepped into the upstairs hallway. Her sister was still a few steps behind her on the staircase. Rebecca reached for the light switch, and just 2 seconds before she turned it on, both girls saw it. The moment the light came on, the thing vanished. Rebecca's sister later said she saw it rush past her on the stairs. Rebecca saw it in the hallway, gliding upwards from the first floor, shooting up towards the second floor, straight towards the attic, which happened to be Rebecca's bedroom. It moved extremely fast and both girls were terrified. They ran back downstairs to tell their parents, but in typical fashion on this channel, their parents dismissed it as probably being their white cat. Except the cat had been downstairs the entire time. Whatever they saw didn't look like an animal anyway. It was white, low to the ground, and about the size of a basketball, round but stretched slightly because of the speed it was moving. It wasn't solid. It looked like white, semi-transparent smoke, yet bright enough to be clearly visible in the dark. There were no features, no face, no limbs, no hair, just a glowing, cloud-like shape that shot up the stairs faster than anything they'd ever seen. Neither Rebecca nor her sister ever saw anything like it again. Her sister believed the sighting happened around the time their grandfather passed away, though Rebecca wasn't so certain. But even now, she still wonders what that white shape really was. In 1984 to 1985, when Michael was about 14 or 15 years old, he lived in a small, older house in Spokane, Washington, with his mother and her partner. The upstairs was a converted attic divided into 2 narrow rooms. At the top of the stairs was a small space he used as a living room, and through a door, an identical space served as his bedroom. The ceiling sloped on both sides so steeply that only a 3-foot strip down the centre allowed him to stand upright. God, that'd make me claustrophobic. Their rescue dog wanted absolutely nothing to do with the attic stairs. Now, Michael assumed that the dog had simply had bad experiences with previous owners, but every time he tried coaxing him up the stairs, the dog would cower and whimper. Well, one day, determined to show him the room, Michael carried the dog up himself. The moment they reached the top, the dog panicked, whining, yelping, flattening himself to the floor. Then he lost control of his bowels, bolted back down the stairs and ran straight out of the house. Now, Michael brushed it off. He never felt anything threatening in the attic, so he wasn't overly worried. Well, about a week after moving in, he started waking up at around 3 a.m. almost every night. Why is it always 3 a.m? Is that the witching hour? I think that's the witching hour. Each time, he heard faint, classical music drifting through the attic. He assumed it was coming from neighbours or from downstairs and didn't think too much of it. And then came the night he left the door between his 2 attic rooms open. Again, at around 3 a.m, he woke to the music. But this time, there was a soft glow coming from his little living room area. When he stepped into the doorway, he saw his stereo turned on. Turned to the local AM classical station. The volume was turned down to almost nothing. Well, that night he slept with the light on and the door shut. Well, the following morning, the stereo was back on the FM station he normally listened to, as if nothing had happened. But nearly every night after that, he continued waking up to the faint sound of classical music coming from the stereo. Well, since the attic never felt threatening, Michael decided to treat whatever was happening as harmless. As a gesture of goodwill, he began tuning the radio to the FM version of the classical station before bed, with the volume set low but higher than the ghost preferred. It felt like a small compromise. A couple of months later, they moved out, and at the time his mother told him the rent had gone up. Yet, years later, she admitted the real reason. She was terrified of the ghost in her bedroom. She said the curtains and doors would open and close all night long. Michael considers himself a skeptic and still tries to convince himself that he must have been sleepwalking or something. But, even now, he isn't sure that explains everything that happened in that attic. And that's the end of the stories. Thanks for watching this episode. If you enjoyed it, please smash the like button and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching. I'm your host, Severed Soul.